if you have a horse that's naughty when you're out, treat your dressage tests like training.
Welcome back to Q&A Friday. We've got 2 great questions for you today. Thank you so much for commenting and sending in your questions. I really appreciate your time, and let's get started on your questions. So the first one comes from Alex, and it was a DM. My horse is really well behaved at home, but is naughty when I take him out, and only when I take him out. What can I do about this? I really want to go out, not stay at home. So horses can be naughty when they're out for several reasons. So if you've got a young horse who's naughty when it goes out, then that's probably a lack of confidence and a lack of understanding about what's expected and what's coming, and the horse might be a little apprehensive. Depends what you're doing. If you normally ride at home by yourself, and then when you go out, there's the horse is surrounded by other horses, that can be very exciting, and sometimes your horse might become naughty with that. Other horses, if you've got an older horse that's naughty when you go out but is really good at home, perhaps this is a learned thing. So you want to really, it doesn't matter what kind of naughtiness or how old your horse is and what the reasons are behind your horse's behavior, you want to make things as consistent as possible. So your riding at home needs to be the same as your riding when you are out. And so that's the first thing to work on. Are you doing all the same things? Because sometimes riders, when they go out, they are the ones that get nervous, and the horse feels that energy, and then that can manifest in lots of different behaviors. Sometimes it's naughty behavior. So make sure that you as the rider are really consistent in your riding at home and your riding when you are out. That's the first thing to do. Next, you want to make sure you're not over facing the horse. Maybe if you're at competitions, maybe the tests you're doing are too hard, and the work you're doing in the warm up is a little too hard. So don't be afraid to go back a level or 2 and see if that improves the behavior, because a horse, if there's lots of things going on and the horse has to do this really hard work, that can be too much for some horses. So that's go back in your levels, go to a different competition, enter a lower level and try that. Of course, if it's a horse issue, out with lots of other horses, whereas at home you might train alone, then start to bridge that gap a little. Go and ride at a friend's house where there's just you and another person, or your horse and another horse, or go to a really quiet dressage day, where there's not going to be too many people. Go to a clinic, so that that you might have just a few horses floating around. You might be sharing the arena with 1 or 2 other horses. That's another really good way of bridging the gap between what's really, what's normal at home and what can be really exciting when they're out at competition. The other thing is that horses can respond to different environments differently. At home, if you've got lots of trees and buildings and sheds, and it's quite enclosed and cozy, and whereas where you go out might be open spaces, grass for miles, trees a long way away, that's it's a very much more open situation. The horse may be responding to that. So again, try and bridge that gap. So whether you can go to different places that are less open and slowly build up to a more open place, or if you can ride at home somewhere that's more open, mix it up, and in that way you start bridging that gap and building the horse's confidence, so that
it's not freaking out so much when it does go into a different environment. The other thing to think about is that, you know, the horse just might be lacking experience. So don't be afraid to just take it out weekend after weekend after weekend to be able to get that experience under the horse's belt, so that, you know, if you go out 6 weekends in a row, by the time you're getting ready for number 7, the horse is like, you know, I know what's coming, okay, I'm fine with it. Yeah, so don't be afraid to do that either. And sometimes you need to take that time. Not everyone has 6 or 7 weekends in a row where they are available to go to a show or to take their horse out, but it might be what your horse needs. So schedule it in somehow, you know, schedule it into your calendar. And it might not be straight away, it might be, you know, later in the year, but set aside that time where you can take the horse out, you know, every weekend until the horse starts to calm down and, you know, just sees going out as another, you know, another training session. The other thing to think about is that some horses are a bit clever for various reasons. You know, they know that things are different when you're out, and so they behave differently. And you know, there's lots of reasons, there can be lots of reasons for that, and it doesn't really matter why it's happened. You have to address it now, and, you know, you still have to be able to work with your horse, you know, going into the future. So there's, you know, like, it's well known that you can't, you know, when you're competing, you're not training, or when you're training, you're not competing. Keeping those two things separate. So if you have a horse that's naughty when you're out, treat your dressage tests like training. And you may have to do things in your tests for training purposes that will incur you an error of course, or, you know, whatever. So if you think you're going to be doing that, just go, you know, before you go in, speak to the judge and just mention, you know, what might potentially happen. You know, judges are going to be okay with that. Official judges are definitely going to be okay with that. And, you know, like, it's not as uncommon as you think. Riders often have to just take their horse out, and, you know, you know, you're blowing that test. You're blowing that test so that you can train your horse on something in particular, because you don't want your horse to get into the habit of thinking, once I'm in that competition arena, I'm free to do whatever I want. That becomes a bit of a fraught situation. And yeah, so you might have to, it's part of the process and it's part of your training. So don't worry about blowing a few tests. You know, you might have to, you know, blow a few in a row, and that doesn't matter, as long as you can train through that problem that your horse is giving you, and, you know, you'll come out the other end all that much better for it. So there's some ideas on what to do with a horse that's naughty when you go out. Do you have a naughty horse when you go out? Comment below and let me know. So question 2 is on canter. And this person says, I'm scared to go into canter because my horse rushes. How can I get her to calmly go into canter? So that's quite a common question. So there's many things you can do, but you want to think about perhaps the reasons behind the rushing into canter. You know, the horse may not be strong enough to do it. The horse may be, you know, what happens to your body when you go into canter? Are you pulling on the reins? You know, the horse might be responding to a pull on the reins and a lack of balance from the rider. So as the horse goes into canter, the rider might be losing balance, and make sure you're not that rider. Make sure your inside rein follows the horse's mouth as you go into canter, and make sure your seat is ready to go forward as well. You don't want to get left behind. You don't want to unbalance the whole, unbalance you all because you're not you're not up to speed with your horse. So make sure you're on top of that. You know, again, a good core, very good strong core on behalf of the rider is, it solves lots of problems, including the canter transition problem. So make sure you've nailed trot. And sometimes, you know, and this is quite, it's not uncommon with young horses. Sometimes they grow and they become uncoordinated, and often you just have to back off the canter for a couple of weeks, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it might be necessary, that might be where your horse is at, or, you know, for whatever reason, you back off the canter for a couple of weeks and then try it again in your training and see if there's a difference. So make sure your trot is really solid, consistent. Make sure your contact is good in your trot. Make sure your trot, walk, trot transitions are really good, and get your leg yields happening. Often it's horses often rush because they don't want to engage the inside hind leg. So that's your leg yields, okay? So make sure you've got your leg yields, you know, really consistent, and you know that they're reliable for you. And of course, you can use a leg yield in preparation for your canter. Ask for your canter out of a leg yield, and that's a really great way to prevent your horse rushing into the canter. Again, the contact is another one. So make sure the inside hand is following the mouth. Do not pull on that inside rein. Pulling on the inside rein, you know, if you're doing it, you know, it doesn't matter why you're doing it. Really make sure you're not putting pressure on that rein as the horse goes into canter, because that pressure disengages the inside hind leg and prevents the horse being able to use its body properly. So if you've got a disengaged hind leg, the horse really has to pull itself into canter with its front legs, and that, you know, that would feel like rushing. You know, the horse has to use its shoulders and its neck to get itself into canter, and then bring its back end up, to be with the rest of its body. And so that would feel very rough and bumpy and a bit rushy. So, you know, that's why it's so important not to pull on your inside rein. Again, make sure the horse is straight. Some horses, don't go into canter straight, or, you know, they don't want to because it's too hard. It takes too much effort. So make sure your horse is straight as you're asking for the canter. So try all of those things and see if you can get most of those, then your canter should improve greatly. So pop a comment below if canter is, you know, your Achilles heel. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for listening to Q&A Friday. I really appreciate your time and your questions and comments. Don't forget to thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe, and turn on the notifications, and you won't miss another episode. Until next time, everyone, have a great ride. I'll see you then.